Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to walk you through the full process of designing and building my custom subwoofer box for my Bonce 3012R. Just from the software and web pages to the build process and the final install, I'm looking to break down every step that I went and making this box hit harder and cleaner than it ever has before. First program I'm going to be using today is going to be WinISD. Once you enter the subwoofer's full parameters into the program, it brings you up with the box, and from there you can go through and figure out how the speaker is going to react with the port and box that you design. So first here, what I like to do is I just like to enter the recommended box and tune from the manufacturer, and I like to keep this in the background as a good reference to how the manufacturer thinks the box should react to the tunes and frequencies played. And for this sub, the Bonce, it recommends a 1.95 cubic foot box and a 35 Hz tune. And the first thing I like to do, which is pretty basic, I like to increase the size of the box. I find up to 33% is great and won't result in issues down the track. So 133% of 1.95 cubic foot is 2.5 cubic foot, and that just kind of increases the output and lets you go a little bit lower than the factory tune without getting too much excursion. So you can drop this down a bit, but it's just a good place to start as the maximum you can go to. So what I did here is I took a bit off that and I just went to 2.4 cubic foot. Now, its important thing is what you do with the port next. I like to consider the manufacturer's box volume to port area, not copying the same port area that they have in their box. So just for as above, we have a 1.94 cubic foot box and 31 inch squared of port area, and you divide the port area by the box volume to get the port per cubic foot, and in this case we end up with 15.97 port area per cubic foot of box. It's important to achieve the same number later with a bigger box. After playing around with the frequency, I decided on a final number of 31 Hz. I think this gives the best response and extends the reaction low enough without too much of a sacrifice. Now, checking over the rear port, I make sure it's on a square, not a circle, and it's going to be the correct height for what I'm going to choose in my box later on. I then multiply my new box volume by the port to box number I got early on, which was 15.97. In this case, 2.4 cubic foot multiplied by 15.92, and this gets me to my new port area to shoot for, 38.16 inches squared. Once you manipulate the port diameter to achieve this, go down to check the port velocity to make sure it's not off. I'm looking at 28 meters per second in my box here, which is spot on in my opinion. Then I'll swap over and use Subbox Pro to refine the design even further, including calculating the internal volume, accounting for all bracing displacement, and ensuring the port length is matched to WinISD's recommendations. Firstly, we'll just go through the box page here, and we'll put our width and our height through, followed by the net internal volume, which you'll get from WinISD, and the material thickness we're going to use for the box, and press calculate to save those changes. Now the subwoofer, the cut-up diameter, you can worry about that if you really want to, but I'm not really going to touch on that. The mounting depth, that'll make sure that your sub isn't going to hit the magnets on the back wall once you're finished. The woofer displacement, I think you can take the VD from your TS parameters and fill in there if it doesn't say it in your manual, and then press calculate. And now we'll move on to the port, where you're going to have to select the type of port you're going to be using, followed by the frequency you decided on in WinISD, and then put in your port area of centimeters squared that you got from WinISD to get the correct air velocity, and press calculate. Now it's important to look at this shaded box, which is your port length, and that probably won't be the same port length that you'll be looking at in WinISD, because it doesn't really compensate for your surface area of the woofer. Like if it's a 12 inch, it's going to be running off a generic 12-inch displacement, where yours might actually be quite larger or smaller than that. So you're going to have to play around with the frequency to get that port length correct. So in this case, I've got to 30.25 to get my 31 Hertz tune into the woofer. When you're doing this now, it is important to think about the bracing you're going to put into the box and calculate the volume of that. So if I just used some basic 25mm cuts of the MDF routed each side, and I calculated that as in just the volume, length, width and height of those bracings. Had some triangled corners, I calculated those. So and then once you've got all those, what you're going to want to do is go back to the subwoofer, and what I do is I just add it to the woofer displacement to add it to the box. Once the design is dialed in, I take the plan from Subbox Pro and I import the sheet sizes for the cut list to a cut list optimizer to get an efficient layout of how I'm going to cut the sheets. And for this instance, I'm going to be using 18mm MDF and 2400 by 1200 sheets. I put that 2400 by 1200 into the stock sheets, and I filled out the cuts and pressed calculate, and that gives me my final cut list. And what you can do here, because Subbox Pro doesn't actually do this, if you take your width and your height from Subbox Pro, you can actually add another cut, and that'll give you a double thickness front baffle. This reinforces the sub's mounting area to handle the power and really just stiffens up the whole box, and I definitely recommend doing this. Now, before assembling, on the lower side of the bottom panel, I got a working square, and I traced around all of the bottom section. So this was, say, 18mm, and I went around the outside and traced all the panels where they're going to be sitting. And then I figured out where the port's going to go, traced that around, made sure that it all was laid out correctly on there. And then I took the underside of the box and I put 9mm in onto the square and went around the lower side of the box and traced out all the insides where the screws are going to go through and pre-drilled it all, just to make sure that everything was going to be sitting perfectly where it was designed to sit. The first thing I did was I put the port in, because I wanted to get that screws through for the triangle bracing and make sure it was all correct. After I completed the port, I started cutting some triangles, and I found this nice little piece here, so I put that piece at the end of the port to really stiffen up the end of the port, and put the back and the two sides on. And after I put the back and the two sides on, I cut some bracing just to make sure the whole thing was really stiff, and to reduce that panel flex and resonance to keep the sound output as high as I could. I even added some bracing inside the port after hitting the panels and realizing these longer surfaces really just need to resonate a little bit, and I didn't want to lose that, that tiny little bit of output. So I put some bracings in the port as well. I got a piece of wood. I've never done this before. I got a piece of wood and I drilled a hole and screwed a screw through it, and I measured out my subwoofer hole, and I put another screw in the other end. And what I did was I screwed it into the center hole and went around in circles, and actually got a perfectly circular hole to drill, which was quite amazing. So I drilled a few holes, jigsawed out the hole for the sub, and made everything line up really nicely. Once I was happy with that, I drew the port and a rough circle on the top panel, sanded the edges smooth, and I laid the top piece of wood down, glued it down, screwed it all in there real nice and tight. After that, I drilled a few holes in the top where the subwoofer hole is and the port hole, and I got a router in there to get a nice little flush cut on them all. Now that that's all in, I got the sandpaper out, sanded it all up, all the sides, routed up all the corners to a rounded corner, rounded the end of the port around, and got the wood putty out, and I put the wood putty in, sanded it all again, and yeah, I was really happy with the way it turned out. For finishing, I went with an aerosol black bedliner paint to give the box some durability and texture. I was really happy with the way it turned out. Probably could have done a few more coats, but 3 cans really didn't go as far as I thought it would have. And I got some white paint. I got the kids to throw some white lines over it. Thought it ended up looking pretty cool. Had a little bit of white paint left over, so I thought I'd pour it down the port, and man, I think it came out pretty sick. After a few little things, I ended up adding some spacers to mount the amp. This spacer is going to give some good airflow to the bottom of the amp to let that air in and out. And finally, I installed the subwoofer, the Bonce 3012, and the Hematech 2500 RMS amp. Right, I finally got out. Put the battery on charge last night. I didn't put the second battery in, I just left the one in. It seems to go alright where it is, so probably won't be able to play for too long with only having one battery in the car at the moment. It's a pretty big battery, but got the kids out here. Laura wasn't too impressed with it. She said that it hurts her ears, so I thought I'd pull over and I'd give a bit of a demo for the end of the video. So here's the end product. That's a Hematech 2500.1, so I'm running 2500 watts RMS through this sub at 1 ohm. I do have a 5000 coming, so I'm pretty excited to put the 5000 on and order some lithium to finish this off, and yeah, do some more testing with batteries and stuff and make a few cool little videos. But anyway, we ended up going with 2.4 cubic feet in the end, and we got 16 square inches of port, actually about 16 and a half square inches of port, and that's over 1 meter long, and it really brings this Def Bonce alive.
Dad, we found a cockatoo!
Did ya? So yeah, come down the soccer fields here, and yeah, hopefully don't disturb anyone. We'll run this on max and we'll start on the basics.
Rack City bitch, rack City bitch. 10, 20s on your VIP, no guest list. TT Raw, you don't know who you fucking with. My other bitch, fucking with my other bitch. Fucking all night, nigga, we ain't sell a bitch. Nigga sound too dope, I ain't selling it. Make the right too hard. Tell that bitch hop out, walk the boulevard. I need my money pronto.
We're going to have to let that recover a little bit. We were down to 12 volts there. That What do you reckon, Emerson?
Good! And it hurt my ears.
Did it?